I'm the Philosophical Bachelor, and today I'm going to continue reading my bachelor thesis, Superabundance and Excess. Is Bataille's conception of general economy credible? Chapter 2, Bataille's Method. Bataille explicates his method of analysis in the Accursed Share preface. He thinks that the problem of political economy remains unsolved because it is not properly framed. We are not asking the right questions. He aims to solve it by writing a book of political economy to offer a bold reversal that substitutes a dynamism in harmony with the world for the stagnation of isolated ideas, of stubborn problems born of an anxiety that refused to see. He contends that it is not necessity that gives living things, including mankind, its problems, but its opposite, the accidental and the superfluous, which he has termed luxury. Political economy is a study of how a country is governed, taking into account both political and economic factors. Alan Drazen notes that up until the 20th century, what is today called economics was known as political economy, reflecting the notion that economics and politics are inseparably bound with political factors potentially having a determining influence in economic outcomes. Tracing the evolution of Bataille's thought on political economy leads us to his 1933 essay, The Notion of Expenditure, where he lays the groundwork which he will later develop into his key economic concepts of excess, expenditure, transgression, and sovereignty in his 3-volume The Accursed Share. Benjamin Noyes speculates that Bataille's reflection on the crisis of value in the notion of expenditure was influenced by the 1929 Wall Street crash and the subsequent Great Depression. Unleashing widespread suffering globally, this episode was a catastrophic failure of market-based principles in furthering the welfare of men, though Bataille advances evidentiary support for his notion of expenditure using anthropological and sociological studies instead. He is, however, very much aware of the impact of economic crisis. He writes in The Accursed Share, "Economic crises, which necessarily have in my work a sense in which they are decisive events, are only represented therein in a summary, superficial fashion. If the truth must be told, I had to choose. The fear and suffering caused by economic crisis gave him the impetus to search for a solution, but he notes that such anxiety can impede the research process. Hence, instead of an analysis of economic crisis, he adopted rules of a reason that do not relent and laws that govern us, in a manner akin to the appeal of laws in conventional economics, though he is careful to avoid redoing the work of the economist. He takes a broader view of the general problem of nature, shifting the focus of his economics to expenditure instead of production, which is the conventional loci of supply-side economics. Bataille is against the then and still current way the economy is managed, which is mostly along capitalistic lines based on modern economic theory. Scarcity is the concept at the heart of modern economic theory, which he terms as restrictive economy. According to Lindsay McGooey, a fundamental axiom of orthodox economic thought has been the assumption that universal scarcity constrains economic decision-making. Such economics addresses how scarce resources can be allocated efficiently to maximize the welfare of mankind. While Bataille's critique of scarcity and utility in restrictive economy is focused on capitalism, communism is not the solution, since Marx's economic theory is also premised on these same concepts. Abbott observes that Marx's Capital is one long meditation on scarcity. Declining wages and class conflict are all about scarcity. Reflecting on Bataille's ideas, Jean Baudrillard comments that the Marxist critique of capitalism is insufficient since it is only a critique of capital, a critique of exchange value by an exaltation of use value. Marxists are still trying to find a good use of economy in a world governed by scarcity, where what Bataille is trying to do is to completely reimagine the condition of the world, where if we simply became aware of the true reality of a superabundant world, we would not be fixating on the efficient allocation of resources and the accumulation of savings for a rainy day. Instead, we would turn our attention to our true economic moral duty to expand excess gloriously rather than catastrophically. The conventional perspective of economics can be traced back to Adam Smith, who has been lauded as the father of modern economics. Smith presents an economic rationalism that equates the market with society as a whole. Omid Nodaushani posits that Bataille seeks to overturn Adam Smith's morality of the marketplace and its associated notions of scarcity and utility, which are foundational to modern economic theory. Similar to the ancient Greeks who have directly participated in the polis by debating at the agora, a public space for assembly and markets, the modern marketplace in which economic activity is conducted remains as one of the few venues still available where people have an opportunity to participate directly in public life, writes Nodaushani. Consumers participate mainly by using money to express their demand for goods and services, using their dollars to vote for the products they desire. Suppliers participate by responding to these votes by setting prices to meet the demands of the consumer, so that at market equilibrium, the price will be such that the quantity demanded is met by the same quantity supplied, clearing the market of the product. Understanding demand and supply formation is hence critical to understanding how the economy works. Demand is expressed on an aggregate basis through the demand curve. The construction of the demand curve in microeconomic theory is based on utility, making it a cornerstone axiom of modern economic thought. According to Nodaushani, utilitarian principles remain hegemonic today in determining market behavior even after a revolution in business ethics in the 1990s, recalling Karl Marx's eternal words. The ideas of the ruling class are in every epoch the ruling ideas. Utility is the property of an object to produce benefit, advantage, pleasure, good, or happiness, theorizes Jeremy Bentham, the founder of modern utilitarianism. According to utilitarianism, people are propelled by the desire for pleasure and the avoidance of pain. The principle of utility is hence to maximize utility by maximizing our pleasure and minimizing our pain. As already explained, while Bataille is not against utility per se, he contrasts the worldview based on utilitarian rationalism, where one spends only when one can obtain a return, with his general economics based on unproductive expenditure, where waste and expenditure reap in glory those who give generously. However, it's not glory, such as the glory received by the giver in potlatch, also an aspect of utility. Bataille observes that the notion of utility in conventional restrictive economics has long departed from Bentham's benefit, advantage, pleasure, good, or happiness. In the former, the goal of material utility is, theoretically, pleasure, but only in a moderate form, since violent pleasure is seen as pathological. On the one hand, this material utility is limited to acquisition, in practice to production, and to the conservation of goods. On the other, it is limited to reproduction and to the conservation of human life. Hence, Bataille's critique of utility is not utility per se, but on the outcomes of a utilitarian economic mindset which makes production and accumulation the central phenomena in human life. He writes, any general judgment of social activity implies the principle that all individual effort, in order to be valid, must be reducible to the fundamental necessities of production and conservation. Pleasure, whether art, permissible debauchery, or play, is definitively reduced in the intellectual representations in circulation to a concession. In other words, it is reduced to a diversion whose role is subsidiary. Bataille, with his theme of excess, transgression, eroticism, and sovereignty, wishes to correct for this reduction and return to Bentham's original conception of utility with one important difference. He believes concepts of honor and duty ought to be situated beyond utility and pleasure instead of being hypocritically employed in schemes of pecuniary interest, vulgarizing the nobility of both concepts. Bataille presents India in relation to America as a case in point. India faces a situation of poverty, while America has excess resources. General economy suggests, therefore, as a correct operation, a transfer of American wealth to India without reciprocation, he writes, a kind of Marshall Plan, but for India. He adds that the pressure resulting from this inequality is a threat to America, seeming to suggest that it is in America's own interest to use its success to raise the global standard of living, since it could otherwise result in danger. A utilitarian economics that includes duty and honor as part of the utility calculation will understand Bataille's proposal as quid pro quo, a payoff in the guise of humanitarian assistance to avoid potential war. This is, however, not Bataille's intention if he uses ideas on potlatch, with America as the giver of potlatch and India as the receiver. He explains, the gift that one made was a sign of glory. By giving, one exhibited one's wealth and one's good fortune, one's power. Some splendid expenditure that might add luster to his person by displaying the favor of the gods who had given him everything. It is a way for the donor country to grasp what eludes him, to combine the limitless movements of the universe with the limits that belong to him, in transcending its limits of growth, to gain not pecuniary interest but prestige, glory, and rank, to exchange its profane resource, wealth, for the sacred. Bataille's approach is so radical as to initially seem absurd. With his theory of general economy based on the solar cosmology, is Bataille proposing a metaphysics of the world where superabundance rather than scarcity is the basic condition because he believes that that is how our world actually is? Or is he presenting a radical normative account of our world so as to conceptualize a new way forward for mankind? I believe it is the latter, as Bataille makes clear that his conception of general economy is intended to transform our approach to economics and its accompanying ethics. He aims to shock and jostle our thinking. He writes, "I will simply state that the extension of economic growth itself requires the overturning of economic principles, the overturning of the ethics that grounds them. Changing from the perspective of restrictive economy to those of general economy actually accomplishes a Copernican transformation, a reversal of thinking and of ethics." Bataille believes that the curse of the accursed share can be lifted. It depends on man and only on man, he writes. To do this, Bataille thinks, similar to Marx, that people first need to be conscious of the movement from which the curse emanates, that is the general economy, so that living standards globally can be raised. He believes that his solution is so simple that it can achieve widespread acceptance. The way to raise it to the self-consciousness of mankind is to understand how general economy has been present in history. But is Bataille's interpretation of history correct? This question is especially important since it presents his method as empirical. To answer it, this paper will next examine a critique of Bataille's conception of capitalism and Potlatch by Gu et al., who draws on the work of Gilder.